that. All right, so we're off. So just as I was saying, this weekend is a way to celebrate our unity in Christ, the way that we are peacekeepers on our corner. And so we're going to dive deep into the ways that racism has formed our communities, and the ways that it has severed relationships, it has robbed generational wealth, and has ultimately limited us from being united in Christ. It's fundamentally a spiritual issue, and that's why it's important for us as a faith community to be talking about this and to taking that deep dive in. Our speaker today and tomorrow is Christian Brooks. She is the representative for domestic issues for the PCUSA Office of Public Witness, which is the Presbyterian policy office in DC. So she does really cool and meaningful stuff. If you sign up for the emails from the Office of Public Witness, you will get a really good picture of all the things that they're doing and the ways that you can be involved. And so I highly recommend that you all sign up for that email list. She holds degrees in accounting from the University of Pittsburgh, a Master of Divinity from Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, and a Master of Science in Public Policy and Management from Carnegie Mellon University. And if all those accolades aren't enough, she's also a really good friend. We lived together in Pittsburgh. We attended grad school together. And she was a really important leader in helping to usher in a period of racial reconciliation at our seminary, which was really influential for my own sense of call in ministry. And that's been really formative for me. So I'm excited that she's here and that you all get to see her energy and to see her wisdom. And I'm excited to hear her sermon tomorrow as well. So before Christian gets started, I want to give a little overview for how our time will go. Christian will be speaking, and then we'll be doing a simulation together when we'll break up into breakout rooms, and Christian will have specific instructions for that. And then after we're done with that simulation, Willie Bryan and Dustin Petty will give a presentation about how all of this applies to the greater Lansing area, our neighborhood, and to try to ground that for us. So that's also really good. The aim is for us to conclude around 1 o'clock, but we can always stay later for Q&A and just for fellowship as well. So before Christian, you take over, I'd like to lead us in a time of prayer. So if we could all pray together. Holy God, we thank you for this new life that you have given us today, this morning, in this moment, and in this time. God, thank you for uniting us in Jesus Christ. Thank you for the ways that we are interconnected. And God, lead us as we dive deep into the ways that we are disconnected, the ways that we have neglected our relationships with one another and with your Son, Jesus Christ. And God, help us to dwell in your peace that surpasses all understanding. Help us to sit patiently in that peace so that we may share that gospel peace with our neighbors and with our community and with our state and with our country. God, we ask that your Holy Spirit fill this time in all of our homes and all of our rooms, wherever we may be attending this morning. God, I pray that your Holy Spirit rushes in, that we may be moved from this place of warmth and comfort out into the world to see the ways that your justice is breaking in all around us. God, help us to be present with each other as we are present with you in this separated and sacred and holy time that we have today. And God, we lift this all up in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. All right. It is all you, Christian.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here with you all. I like the opportunity to get out of the policy world and come to churches or be virtual with churches now and just to talk about some of the things that I'm working on at the Office of Public Witness and talk about how it connects with what we are preaching about, what we're doing Bible studies about. So I really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to, again, be with my good friend, Ben, and all of the rest of you all. So today we are going to dive into some good work. It's going to be some deep stuff. However, it's going to be good. It is work that we got to do. So before we get started, let's all just take a deep breath. Okay, so let me get my screen set up so that I can share with you all. Okay, one second. This always takes me a long time. Okay, can you see it? Okay, awesome. So as Ben mentioned, we are going to do the racial wealth gap learning simulation today. So the racial wealth gap learning simulation was designed by Marlisa Gamlin, who used to work at Bread for the World. She used to do a lot of racial equity work at Bread for the World, and I was actually a fellow under her at Bread for the World. So I had the opportunity to dive deeply into the racial wealth gap with her. It is an awesome simulation, and we'll have the opportunity to learn a lot. But okay. But before we get started with the simulation, we are going to talk about who is the Office of Public Witness. So I know that a lot of Presbyterians have not heard about the Office of Public Witness. So I'm going to give an overview of the Office of Public Witness. We'll have an opening activity. We'll talk about a little bit about the scope of hunger and poverty in America. We're going to do the simulation, and then we'll have a short discussion about the results of the simulation. So let's dive in. Who is the Office of Public Witness? So the Office of Public Witness is the public policy and advocacy office of the General Assembly. So we advocate to Congress the policies that have been passed at the General Assembly. We don't make policy at the Office of Public Witness, and we can't speak on anything that has not been passed at General Assembly. But we also do educating. So we do things like this where we go into churches and talk about different policies that have happened in the past or different policies that are going on right now within the United States. We talk about different issues that are going on, such as immigration, racism, environmental justice, climate change, things of that sort. Now, there are 4 of us employed at the Office of Public Witness. There's myself, Christian. I am the representative for domestic issues. We have Catherine Gordon, who is the representative for international issues, Jimmy Hawkins, who is the director of the office, and Annette Greer, who is our office manager. We are located at 100 Maryland, which is within the United Methodist Building, right across the street from the Capitol. So if you're ever in DC, stop by to see us. Maybe not right now because we're still working from home because of COVID. However, when we're back in the office, stop by to see us. Now, I am going to show you a short video that kind of gives more of an understanding of what we do at the Office of Public Witness. Now, keep in mind, this video is outdated. Most of the people in this video do not work as the Office of Public Witness anymore, but that's okay because it's still going to give you an understanding of the office.
We will continue to come together to pray and to worship in the name of a just and loving God. We will continue to be concerned about our brothers and sisters who don't have homes, children who have been added to schools, families who are struggling, because we believe that Jesus Christ, who left us with the greatest commandment, is wiping over us. We've been called disturbers of the government. And so I think it's important that we take opportunities to come and to voice any concerns that we have with things that are going on the governmental level. For about the last 71 years, this office has been in existence, and the Presbyterian Church has set aside a person to be the voice for the church to interpret its policies. So I think we have a strong legacy of prophetic ministry of being involved in social action and social justice. There's almost no area of social justice that we have not spoken in. And we're progressive, and no matter whether you agree or disagree, when you sit down and deal with our social witness public policy statements, you see there's a biblical foundation, there's theological justification. We move on to our rationale. This office has been in the history of being involved in social action and social justice. And we're progressive, and no matter whether you agree or disagree, when you sit down and deal with our social witness public policy statements, you see there's a biblical foundation, there's theological justification, and we move on to our rationale.
Okay. Okay. So I guess they cut the people out who didn't work here anymore, which is probably for the best. So let's start with our opening activity. So first question, what brings everyone here today? Now we have about 26 people on, so if you want to put in the chat, and if you want to raise your hand, we can take a few, folks. So what brings you all here today? Miss Willie, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. I just thought I'd say out loud that I'm here because, and please just call me Willie.
Okay.
And I'm here because we want to impact racial and social justice in the greater Lansing area. And we want to do that specifically by starting a program with reparations.
Okay, awesome, awesome. It looks like we have some stuff in the chat. So Destin said he is here for reparations, atoning for our past collective sin. Kurt Miller says that he is here looking forward to learning and being challenged. We have Bill seeking to understand how both Black and white communities view reparations and what the word can mean. Okay, Joan, my Quaker meeting is looking for ways to acknowledge and repair racial and economic injustice. We told us about this as a way toward a practical step towards reparations. Okay, great, awesome, awesome. So let's get into another question. So are you familiar with the racial wealth gap or the racial income gap? Have you heard about it? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. Okay, so for the most part, most people have heard about it. Okay, let's get into our last question. What is equality? What is equity? And what is the difference? Go ahead, Ben.
As I understand it, equality is kind of like, it could be another way of saying it would be like separate but equal. Like everyone would have the same opportunities, so to speak, but not necessarily at the same, not together. Where equity, it's actually making up for what has been wronged, and equity it just has it's more justice seeking, I guess, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. We got some stuff in the chat. Okay, Mary Lee says, Equal means we all have the same. Equity means we start at the same place. Okay, Joan, equity is everyone having what they need. Equality is everyone having the same. Okay, Jen, equity looks for folks who are missing at the table. Okay, we have some good answers. We have some good answers. So let's get into it. We have racial equality versus racial equity. So most of you were right. Racial equality means treating everyone the same and giving everyone the same resources regardless of need, right? Not taking into consideration systemic racism, not taking into consideration allocation of resources, just giving everybody the same thing. Whereas racial equality looks at the need. It gives everyone the resources that they need in order to achieve equal outcomes, right? So, for example, if you had two students, had student A and student B. Student A had a B in the class. It's a math class. And student B had a D in the class. Equality would give each student the amount of tutoring hours they need so both students can achieve an A, right? So it might give student A 5 hours, or no, student A was 1 to B. It might give student A 1 hour of tutoring so that they could get to that A, whereas student B would get 5 hours of tutoring so that they could get to that A, right? So it takes into consideration the whole person, the person's situation, in order to help them achieve the same outcome as their counterparts. So let's look at a more practical example. Oh, well, also, sorry about that. So we have equity and equality, right? But our goal is to get towards justice, which is what Ben said, right? And justice is tearing down the barriers that put us in this situation in the first place, right? And that barrier is injustice, that barrier is oppression, that barrier is inequality that put us in the situation to where we have to give resources based on need, because in all actuality, everyone should be at the same starting point, right? So let's go to a more practical example so that we can understand a little better. So in DC, there's a high concentration of food deserts in Southeast DC. So Southeast DC is a predominantly Black community. It's a high poverty community. So it is located right over here. Can you all see my mouse? Okay, so Southeast DC is located right over here. And this is where you see all of the red. Now, up this way is Northwest DC. And then over this way, you have Northeast DC. So, question for you all. If I had 8 grocery stores to put in the District of Columbia, where would you put them? Now, keep in mind, there are 4 quadrants in DC. There is Northeast DC, Northwest DC, Southeast DC, and Southwest DC. So equality would just put 2 in each quadrant, right? You would put 2 in Northeast, 2 in Northwest, 2 in Southeast, and 2 in Southwest. However, equity would take into consideration all of this red that is in Southeast DC, meaning all of these people are without immediate access to a grocery store. So equity would put a higher concentration of the grocery stores in Southeast DC, maybe 4. And maybe Northeast DC would get 2. Maybe Southwest would get 1. Maybe Northwest would get 1. I used to live in Northwest DC. I had like 5 grocery stores in my immediate vicinity. I lived in Southeast DC. When I lived in Southeast DC, the only reason I could get to a grocery store is because I had a car and I had to drive at least 10 minutes to get there, right? So that is the difference between equity and equality. And a lot of our policies that are coming out now are more so looking at equality rather than looking at equity. rather than looking at the resources that people need in order to achieve equal outcomes as their counterpart. So let's get into the scope of the racial wealth gap learning simulation. So before COVID-19, more than 3.2 million people in the United States faced hunger, and over 34 million people lived below the poverty line. And with that, 50% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck, meaning if half of the households in America lost their jobs, they would face poverty. They'd be living in poverty, right? This is before COVID. Now, at the height of COVID, more than 40% of people living in the United States faced hunger. And hunger increased by more than 3 times due to COVID. And over 17% of the people living in the US lived below the poverty line. And more than half of US households would face poverty if someone lost a job or got sick. So more than half of the households in the United States were living paycheck to paycheck, right? And this is because of resource issues, but this is also because of education issues, right? Education around wealth. I've recently been talking to people, mainly people of color, about wealth. And the issue is not just bringing in money, right? Bringing money into the household. It's also the education around wealth and the education around building wealth that is also a resource that has not been given to many communities of color. So keep that in mind. Now, before the pandemic, people of color were twice as likely to live below poverty, be 1 check away from becoming poor, and experience hunger. And during the pandemic, Black, Latinx, and Indigenous households have become at least 3 times as likely to experience these realities as their white counterpart. Why? The racial wealth and income divide, which is why we're here. So, without wealth, you are more likely to become poor. And when you are poor, you're more than likely to experience hunger. So again, when we talk about wealth, we're talking about having assets that can generate money, that can generate cash, right? So a house is an asset. A house can bring you wealth because you can sell it. You can sell it, you can bring in money, you can use that money for whatever you want. Stocks are assets. Stocks are wealth generating assets. Land, also wealth generating assets, right? So again, like I said before, it's not necessarily about the paycheck that you're bringing in, because just because you're bringing in a good paycheck, if you lose your job, that money is no longer coming in. However, having wealth, having assets allows you to keep generating money so you can keep surviving even if you don't have a job. So, what are the goals of the simulation? Goals of the simulation is to gain a better understanding of the racial, wealth, income, and hunger gap so that we can understand why racial equity is important to address structural inequality, discuss racial equity within our organizations, congregations, and communities, incorporate a racial equity lens into our daily work, life, worship, policies, practices, advocacy, etc. Feel more comfortable explaining the importance of applying a racial equity lens when working to end hunger and poverty or achieve goals in other issues. And understanding the racial wealth divide is also extremely important in understanding reparations, right? So, the instructions of the racial wealth simulation. So, there will be teams of 4 to 8 participants, and each team will receive an envelope. If we were in person, you will receive an envelope. However, we have a PowerPoint for you, so don't worry about the envelope. We have a PowerPoint for you that has all this information. So each person will receive a PowerPoint, and instead of blindly selecting a card, we will assign you a participant. You will either be assigned a Black participant or a white participant. And in the cases where there are, the cases where someone gets the same race card as their racial identity, we want to kind of mix it up. And once you do the simulation, you'll see why. But there are 3 action cards. There's a money card, there's land cards, there are lost opportunity cards, and then there are policy cards. So starting with a white participant, you'll take turns reading the policy slide to the group, and then reading the actions on the card or on the slide for the players to carry out. The person reading should pause so that everyone can carry out their action, and everyone will gain or lose 1, 2, or all 3 cards in each round. Now, since we don't have cards, you will need a piece of paper and a pencil so that you can keep track of your money, land, and lost opportunity cards. And at the end of the simulation, you'll count how many money cards you have, how many land cards you have, how many lost opportunity cards you have, and then we'll discuss. So I am going to end my screen share here. And so we will put you into groups of, let's see, it's 25 people. So maybe about groups of 5. So
Okay.
we'll put you into a breakout room of 5 people. And so Ben has shared the slide deck in the chat. So if everyone could click on the slide deck so that you can access the slides. And then also a person from leadership will be in one of the groups to make sure that everything is going smoothly. So what you can do in your groups is one person can share their screen, or each person can have the slide deck up. And each person will take turns reading the slide. Everyone will go through the actions on the slide and then go over to the next person.
Yeah.
And leadership, once folks are in their breakout groups, if you could assign them a Black or white participant, and then we can go from there.
Very cool. All right. I will start creating breakout rooms here for everyone. Let's do that. 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Okay. It might be easier too if just leadership folks, if you just share your screen, so that way other people don't have to worry about downloading the PowerPoint presentation and everything. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. 5. Wonderful. Almost there. Okay. Great. All right, the rooms are open now for y'all to go in. All right. Unassigned. So Christian, you said you wanted to hop in and out, correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Willie, I will put you into, let's see, which group would be good. Put you in how do you do that? Ah, here we go. Assign to room. 2. Okay, there you go, Willie. Sorry about that. And then I will go into room 4. And you are free. You should be free to go into any room you want, Christian.
Okay, awesome.
But before I go into a room, I want to make sure that's working for you.
Okay.
Is the breakout room window open?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's giving me the opportunity to join.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna go into room 4. So that's where I'll
Okay.
be. Yep. And I accidentally had a timer put on the breakout room. I don't know how to, I just realized that. So it was a 15-minute timer, which is not enough time. Dang it. Okay. Well, I can, when you go into the different rooms, could you just tell them to ignore the breakout room timer? I just won't close the rooms when the timer goes off.
Okay. It
so
doesn't automatically close?
I don't think so. I think the last time I did that, it was a setting where I think I clicked it where it pops up on my screen to end the groups, but then it doesn't actually end if I don't click it. So
Okay.
hopefully we'll be okay.
Okay.
But if not, we might be going back into breakout rooms.
Okay. I wonder if I can broadcast a message to say disregard the timer.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Here, I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll go to room 4. I'll see ya.
Okay. See ya.
Bye. What's up, everyone?
Oh, we're lost.
Okay. All right. Well, I got the presentation pulled up on my computer. So if y'all are good, I can share my screen, and we can go through that. But basically, before we do that, we need to assign different cards to everyone. So let me pull it up here. So I'll show you what I'm working with here. Okay. Okay. Can you all see that okay?
I guess.
Yes. Okay. Cool. So here are the instructions that Christian just gave in front of us here. So we need to assign racial identity roles. So some will be given a white racial identity, others will be a black racial identity. And the goal here is to be different from your own. And so let's go ahead and do that now. Prince, I'm not sure if you are with us.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, cool. Hey, Prince.
Hey.
So since we're going with racial identity different from their own, you will have a white racial identity. Stan.
No.
No.
I'm
Okay.
kidding.
Oh,
I was joking.
All right. Stan, if you could take a black participant identity role, and let's see, what are the numbers here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's go 2 and 2. So Mary, you can take a black identity role as well. Lois, you will be white. Sally, you will be black, and then I will be white. Just split it up amongst our group evenly there. As we go through these, there's different policy cards, and if one person could volunteer to read the card, and then on the next slide, it will show us what we are doing. So if you have a scrap piece of paper, if you could write down land opportunity card or land opportunity. And then I think the other one is wealth. And then lost opportunity card. And wealth actually is just money, sorry. And those are the three. So something like this. And then we can just keep tally marks as we go along. And there's actual images on the PowerPoint slide as well to help us kind of keep track of everything. So it's going to make a lot more sense once we get going through it, I promise.
Talk's cheap.
What?
Talk is cheap.
That's true. That's true. I guess you'll be the judge of that, huh, Mary?
That's right.
All right. Are you all ready? Let's do it. All right. Does someone mind reading the first policy?
I'll do it. Oh, go ahead, Lois.
Oh, all right. Policy 1, Andrew Johnson's land policies and sharecropping. After the Civil War, only 30,000 African Americans owned small plots of land compared to 4 million who did not because of an 1865 federal law rescinded. Because an 1865 federal law rescinded the government's promise of 40 acres of land for former slaves. These 4 million blacks largely resorted to renting the farmland of their previous master in exchange for a share of their crop. This system of sharecropping tied farmers to their former master because they were legally obligated to buy all farming materials, usually at higher prices, and sell their farming crops solely to their former master, usually at lower prices.
All right. And then do you mind reading the action too, Lois?
Sure. So for the action for black participants, add 1 land card and 1 money card to represent the less than 1% of African Americans who are able to own land and not face debt after slavery. Unfortunately, black participants should also add 4 lost opportunity cards for the 4 million African Americans who had to sharecrop and were denied the initial promise of land ownership. Buying farm supplies from the landowner at higher prices, only to sell their crops back at lower prices, resulted in African Americans facing higher levels of debt and higher rates of hunger.
Right. So this is where the tally marks come in, right? So black participants under the money, you get a tally, get a land card tally mark as well. And then it says 4 opportunity lost tally marks. Okay, so does everyone get that? Cool. All right. Policy number 2, Stan, do you mind reading that since you volunteered for the first one?
Sure. From 1865 on, blacks could have their land seized to pay sharecropping debts, or simply because white landowners declared that black farmers or businesses were in debt. Blacks could not fight these charges because they were legally prohibited from suing whites in court. In addition, from 1949 to 1970, 1 million people lost their land to abuses of the power of eminent domain, which allows local governments to seize private property. About 70% of these families were African American.
So the action here.
Should I go ahead, right?
Yeah, do you mind reading that too?
Okay, for white participants, add 1 land card and 2 money cards for having the legal ability to seize the land of black farmers and business owners, increasing your income and reducing your susceptibility to hunger. For black participants, subtract a land card for the land lost under land seizures. Also subtract a money card for the tens of millions of dollars lost from no longer having land to help earn an income and grow food to eat.
So here it is now. So lose a money card, lose a land card, and then white participants gain the land card and gain 2 money cards. All right. How about policy number 3? Does anyone mind reading that one?
Sure, I'll read it.
Cool. Thanks, Prince.
Policies under this law guaranteed federally backed loans to whites and legally refused loans to blacks and anyone else who chose to live in or near black neighborhoods. This practice, known as redlining, targeted entire black neighborhoods and identified them as grade D. This made it nearly impossible for appraisers in the private sector to do business in black neighborhoods because all the residents were considered bad credit risk. Action. White participants add 1 land card and 1 money card for the equity gained in purchasing homes not near black neighborhoods. Equity increased a family's ability to save for future needs. For black participants, do not add any land cards because of the inability to purchase homes. Do not add money cards since it was illegal to lend to blacks, preventing them from building equity and weakening their ability to state your needs.
Great. So added land card, added money card, and then nothing for black participants. All right.
Seems like there should be a lost opportunity for black.
I know. Yeah. Wait, was that an action one? No, no card. But yes, yeah, you're right, Mary. Kind of at that bigger level, right? Or it's definitely a
Yeah.
lost opportunity, right? Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, for sure.
Just editing the game already.
Yeah, no, that's all good. That's all good. Yeah. How about policy number 4? I'm happy to read that one too. Okay. So the National Housing Act of 1934, Part 2. Since this legislation prevented blacks from receiving federally backed home mortgages, whites usually purchased homes in black neighborhoods and then sold housing contracts to blacks who wanted to become homeowners, often for 2 or 3 times the amount of the mortgage. These contracts only guaranteed black families the rights to the house after all the payments were complete. So missing even 1 payment or being late would result in the black family losing their house immediately. Which that's crazy, right? So basically paying rent and not building the equity in the house itself, just paying money and then losing it. Until 30 years later, you on the off chance that you got it. That's crazy. Okay, so the action for white participants: add 2 land cards for being able to legally purchase homes at the market rate, and then add 2 money cards for the equity earned from home ownership. So 1, 2. And then black participants add 1 land card for signing a contract for a home in hopes of becoming a homeowner one day. Do not add money cards because contracts stripped additional income and wealth from several generations. Also add 1 lost opportunity card because because of the higher interest paid and less equity earned once the home was actually purchased. So this is where we are. So 2 money cards, 2 land cards, another opportunity lost card, and a land card. Everyone good on that? Great.
Yep.
How about policy number 5? Sally, do you mind reading that one?
Sure. Policy number
Begrudgingly.
What?
Begrudgingly.
No, it's fine. I printed these slides earlier, but they didn't come out quite right, so I'll read it off the screen.
Okay.
Policy 5, the Social Security Act. This act excluded farm workers and domestic workers who were predominantly Black from receiving old age and unemployment insurance. Although Social Security was meant to help those affected by the Great Depression, and African Americans were twice as likely as the average family in the US to face hunger during this time, 65% of African Americans were ineligible to receive Social Security. For the action for white participants, add 1 money card for being able to benefit from unemployment and old age insurance during a very grim time in US history. And for Black participants, add 1 lost opportunity card for the inability to benefit from unemployment insurance, even though African Americans were between 2 and 3 times as likely as whites to experience poverty and hunger.
So an added money card and an added opportunity lost card there. That's new to me. Sorry for the commentary, but I mean, 65% of African Americans were ineligible to receive Social Security, and that's like seen as kind of, and that's like wide. There's that understanding that Social Security is for everyone, right? So that's pretty eye-opening to me. All right. Policy 6. Anyone willing to read again for policy 6? Yeah, go for it, Lois. Thank you.
The Fair Labor Standard Acts of 1938. This was enacted to help bolster the economy and get the country out of the Great Depression, but it excluded tip-based jobs and other jobs predominantly held by Black workers, including servers, shoe shiners, domestic workers, and Pullman porters, from this first ever minimum wage legislation. Even though the Black unemployment, hunger, and poverty rates were at least twice those of whites during the Great Depression, the very policies meant to alleviate economic strain were withheld from the Black community. The action for white participants. Add 1 money card for benefiting from the minimum wage to make their families less susceptible to hunger and poverty. Black participants, add 1 lost opportunity card for being stuck in tip-based occupations that did not offer minimum wage to help families survive during the Great Depression. This made it even harder for them to get back on their feet and build for the future.
All right, so an added money card and then a lost opportunity card. Everyone good? All right. All right, policy number 7.
I'll read it.
Thanks, Dan.
This was enacted to help World War II vets adjust to civilian life by providing low-cost home mortgages, low-interest business loans, tuition assistance, and unemployment insurance. Unfortunately, Black veterans were excluded in many of these benefits. White participants, add 2 money cards and 1 land card for the opportunities you receive, such as government guaranteed housing loans, which help to build the American middle class. Black participants, only 1 Black participant adds a money card, representing the few African Americans who had access to some benefits of the GI Bill. All Black participants add 1 lost opportunity card for not being able to benefit from the GI Bill, even though they too had fought for the US in World War II. Wow. Who else?
Again.
Who's the other, excuse me, Black participant?
That would be me.
And me.
Sally, why don't you take a money card.
Okay,
And then, excuse me.
Yeah. Again, like one of those policies that just seem to, appear to be wide sweeping, right? So money card, land card, opportunity loss card, and Sally, you have the one money card, right? All right. Policy number 8. Anyone willing to read policy number 8?
sure. Overturn of separate but equal doctrine. Although the separate but equal doctrine was declared unconstitutional in 1954 with Brown versus Board of Education, American schools are more racially segregated today than at any other time in the past 4 decades. Academic success is less likely in predominantly low-income Black neighborhoods. Black students are 5 times as likely to live in an area of concentrated poverty with underfunded, understaffed, and overcrowded schools. This leaves Black students with limited education, funneling many to minimum wage jobs that offer little hope of advancement or better pay. The action for white participants: add 2 money cards for having up to $733 higher annual per student spending on education than Black students. This contributes to a greater likelihood of attending college and later getting a higher paying job. In the action for Black participants, add only 1 money card to represent the 75% high school graduation rate among African American students compared to 88% among white students. Also add 1 lost opportunity card for the lower student spending that helps funnel many Black students into low-wage work after high school.
Okay, so land card, 2 money cards, and then 1 money card and an opportunity loss card. Okay. Policy number 9. I'm happy to read this one. Subprime loans. Starting in the 1970s and continuing today, the private sector issued subprime loans with higher interest rates to Black families almost exclusively, regardless of a family's income, education, or good credit history. As a result, Blacks continue to unfairly pay more for homes of the same value as their white counterparts. This increases foreclosure rates among Black people, which also contributes to higher food insecurity levels. So white participants add 2 land cards and 2 money cards for securing good interest rates on homes. 2 land cards and 2 money cards. And then Black participants, because you're forced into subprime mortgage as their only option for more than 3 generations, stripping income and wealth from the Black community. High-income Black people were 80% more likely to lose their homes than high-income white people when the housing bubble burst in 2008, and 240,000 Black people lost their homes. Therefore, Black participants add only 1 land card and 1 money card. That's a crazy stat, 80% of high income. Yeah. Okay. So 1 land card, 2 land cards and 2 money cards, and then Black participants, 1 money card and 1 land card. I thought there was an opportunity lost in there too.
Yes, there was.
Oh, I guess not officially, but it should be, right, Mary?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. All right, policy number
Not looking
10.
good for us.
Right. The war on drugs. Is anyone willing to read this one?
I can take this one. The war on drugs, initiated in 1971 and continuing today, widened the racial wealth gap with policies targeting Black and Brown communities. Although rates of using and selling drugs are comparable across racial lines, Blacks are up to 10 times as likely to be stopped, searched, arrested, prosecuted, convicted, and/or incarcerated for drug violations as whites. Since this means that Black families are up to 10 times as likely to have a family member sent to prison, they are more than 10 times as likely to experience hunger because of incarceration. And the actions for white participants: subtract 2 money cards for the more than 180 billion in tax dollars that it costs to maintain mass incarceration today. Also add 1 lost opportunity card, since these taxpayer dollars could instead be used to support programs that end hunger and poverty in the US. For Black participants, combined debt and property depreciation increase hunger and poverty rates within the Black community. Subtract 2 money cards for being more likely to be incarcerated than whites and owing debts of about $13,000 per household in fees and court costs when a family member is incarcerated. Subtract 1 land card for the estimated 11 billion in lower property values in many African American communities caused by the return of large numbers of people from jail or prison.
So 2 money cards gone for white participants, which is the first time that has happened yet in the simulation, right? A lost money card for Black participants, 2 lost money cards, and a lost land card, and an opportunity lost card, first one. All right. Okay. Policy number 11. Is anyone willing to read this? Life after incarceration.
I will.
I'll read it. Okay, go
ahead,
for it.
Prince.
Dan. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Mhm.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, policy 11, life after incarceration, consequences of the war on drugs. When people are released from jail or prison, they are hoping for a second chance, but they face more than 48,000 separate restrictions known as collateral consequences. Some examples of lifelong penalties include being denied the right to vote in some states, being prohibited from applying to high-paying jobs, being ineligible to participate in social safety net programs such as SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly food stamps, and other restrictions such as being banned from getting a barber's license. Since Blacks are up to 10 times as likely as whites to be stopped, arrested, and sentenced, they are also up to 10 times as likely to face these restrictions. Action. Black participants. Consequently, there are 5 times as many Blacks as whites returning home with criminal records. Add 2 lost opportunity cards to represent how more some are unable to reintegrate into society, get a job, and or access SNAP benefits.
Two lost opportunity cards there. Policy number 12, employment discrimination. Are you okay reading that one, Stan?
Yeah. Although racial discrimination in the workforce was legally abolished in 1964 with the Civil Rights Act, racial discrimination continues among all educational levels and job sectors. For example, Blacks are twice as likely not to be called back after they complete job applications or interviews. In addition, the gap between the hourly pay of Blacks and whites has grown from $3.55 an hour in '79 to $6.73 an hour in 2016. Wow. For white participants, add 2 money cards for being twice as likely to receive a callback for a job, and for earning an average of $14,000 a year more than your Black peers. Black participants had 2 lost opportunity cards for being 2 times less likely to receive a job callback and for earning an average of $14,000 a year less than your white peers. Doing the math shows that racial discrimination in the workforce costs Black workers at least $600,000 over the course of their working years.
Is the hourly rate so low because it includes a tipped hourly rate?
Probably.
Okay, yeah, that's my guess too.
That's the gap. Per hour.
Oh, the gap. Okay, all right, that makes sense. That makes more sense. So white participants add 2 money cards, Black participants and lost opportunity card, 2 lost opportunity cards. Policy 13, voting restrictions.
I can take that one too.
Thank you, Lois.
Voting is key to ending hunger. As early as 1890, Blacks faced organized campaigns to prevent them from voting, including biased literacy tests, poll taxes, and lynching. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act passed, making efforts to prevent voting illegal. Today, people returning from jail or prison, who are disproportionately Black, are denied the right to vote in many states. In addition, as recently as 2017, states have proposed voter ID laws, which would require voters to have government-issued identification. It is more difficult for African Americans to obtain these. 1 in 4 face barriers compared with 1 in 10 whites. Barriers include, for example, having to pay up to $150 for an acceptable copy of a birth certificate and Social Security card, travel costs, and time taken off from work. The action for Black participants: add 1 lost opportunity card for 1 being prevented from voting in the early 1900s, when the votes of Black people might have prevented some of the harmful laws mentioned in this simulation from being enacted, and 2, still facing voting restrictions that disproportionately impact Black communities and weaken efforts to improve policies that end hunger and poverty in a racially equitable way.
Two lost opportunity cards. So this is the journey we just went through, right? Those are all the policies that we just discussed, and this is the outcome of it, right? Which is pretty stark when it's laid out like that. Yeah.
One thing that I think it was Sally that pointed out, wow, that there should be more lost opportunity for some of these things. And because I'm in higher ed, I can speak to another one. When we talked about the GI Bill, it didn't mention that although, you know, the popular understanding is that all veterans had access to higher education through the GI Bill. But that was technically true, but then it wasn't in practice true, because many colleges and universities had admissions policies that made it impossible for the Black and brown veterans to be accepted. So
Good point.
yeah. So yet another lost opportunity that, you know, carries through to multiple generations.
Yeah, for sure.
I also thought it was interesting that the Social Security Act, that, you know, that it had all these jobs outside of the minimum wage. And that continues today.
Oh,
We still
yeah.
have, you know, servers and workers that don't get minimum wage,
Mhm.
which itself is much too low, you know.
Right. Yeah, in and
do
of
it.
itself, right? And yet that policy, I forget what the year was on that. What was that, like 1934 or 1935? And that like that just still continues today. That which is just mind-boggling to me of like how was the Social Security Act created with the intention of keeping Americans out of poverty, and then it excludes the most impoverished working class. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Mhm.
Well, just like all the other policies were discriminatory.
Mhm.
I mean, when you look at the little numbers, it's mostly lost opportunities for the Black community.
Mhm. Yeah.
We don't get money, and we don't get land opportunities.
What is so striking to me is how effective we've been at isolating white people from this information.
Yeah.
It certainly is not taught in school.
Nope.
We now, I mean, there's states who are trying to pass laws making it illegal to teach history as it happened.
Kind of why I don't believe in states' rights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
That
white
disconnect.
supremacy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And another whole area that's, you know, if you're watching the news at all, you certainly know that a whole fresh batch of voting restrictions is happening nationwide in many states. There are ones proposed in Michigan. In fact, there's people already circulating a petition, which I would encourage you not to sign it, because the organizers, it's a ballot proposal, but the organizers have no intention of it going on the ballot because they know it would be defeated. That what they want to do is get the minimum amount of signatures, turn it in, and then the gerrymandered legislature that we have right now will make it a law, which our governor cannot veto. So, you know, I think unfortunately a lot of people will sign the petition unwittingly thinking, well, this just gets it on the ballot for voters to decide. But you got to be careful with that one because of our state constitution allowing that.
You know, a couple of years ago, I went to Israel and was just stunned by how blatant the apartheid is. And it's so blatant in America. Well, I mean, this is I think Ben pointed out it's a spiritual issue. This is living with lies like this it's soul killing. Yeah.
It
It's
is.
a church hospital for souls. We've been contributing to our own sickness and the sickness of, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, just one of the hallmarks of our faith too is being a good neighbor, right? And like that's where the housing contracts just like really sticking out to me. It's like you can have one of your neighbors, basically an unregulated bank, like being like, if you pay me this money every month, then you can get this house. It's like this weird, well, I mean, it's not, it's just an unjust, taking advantage of your neighbor, and going around the system that you don't, not even giving Black people the ability to build the equity in the home, just effectively creating your own I don't know, unjust lending system. That's just crazy to me.
I've read about Japanese families that were in some of these housing contracts and then they were interred and, oh, you didn't make your payment. So, you know, all that investment you had, that's mine now.
See, you all keep debriefing. I'm going to jump into the other rooms to see where everyone is, and then hopefully we're at a time where we can all come back together because I want to be aware of time there. So I'll be right back.
Right. There he is.
And I just wanted to take a second to say thank you for putting that simulation together. That was very informative, and it was nice to work through.
I was surprised about.
Hey everyone.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. Sorry to scare you.
Nope.
You're cutting in, man. We just got a chance to start talking.
Oh man, I'm sorry. Well, it looks like you got through the 13 policies, right?
Yep.
All right, cool. So do you all mind coming back to the main group so that we can
I don't know, Ben.
kind
I
of
don't know.
continue that great conversation that you just got started and
You bet. You bet.
bad
All right,
timing
so,
interrupting it.
no. So you'll bring us back?
Yeah, I'll bring you back.
All right.
At the end of my presentation, I'm going to let everyone know where they can find the simulation so you can download all of the resources that you want.
Awesome.
Everyone should be coming back now. I just closed the breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everyone. It looks like most everybody got through the slides. Is that right? We good with that? Okay, cool. So now once Christian returns, we'll do some debriefing. I think some of us got to do some debriefing in our small groups, which is great. But I'd love to hear what the group wisdom is with all of us together. So go for it, Christian.
Okay, hello, everyone. So let me share my screen again. Again, bear with me. I always have trouble with it. Okay, can everybody see it? Okay, great. First of all, let me start off by apologizing. So I was going into the different breakout groups to just make sure everyone was doing okay. And when I left one of the breakout groups, I accidentally left the meeting. So I came back into the meeting, but I didn't have co-host capabilities anymore. So I didn't get to the latter half of the groups. So I apologize for that, but it sounds like you all you were able to push through and do well. So awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the simulations. How many money cards did folks end up with?
I was a white guy. I ended up with 6 land cards, 13 money cards, and only 1 lost opportunity card.
I was the one Black person in my group who ended up with 1 money card.
Me too.
Sally, you were a Black participant with 1 money card?
Correct.
Okay.
I was a white participant with only 1 lost opportunity card.
Okay. So let's dive into that. Let's talk about it. So the Black participants that had 1 money card, and the white participants that had 13 money cards or 13 land cards, that represents the 13-to-1 racial wealth gap, which means for every $1 that Black household has, white household has 13. So here, the median net worth of a Black household is about $11,000. However, the median wealth of a white household is $141,000. Now, for the Black households that only had, or for the Black participants that only had 0 money cards. So that represents the median net worth of households living near the poverty line. So for Black households living near the poverty line, the wealth is 0. The median wealth is 0. Whereas for white households living near the poverty line, the median wealth is about $18,000. Now, can anybody tell me why that is?
The lost opportunity cards.
Exactly. The lost opportunity cards, the opportunities that the Black community had to build wealth was taken through these 13 policies. One of the biggest ways that people have been able to build wealth is through home ownership, right? Through home ownership. But we learned one of the policies, we learned about redlining. We learned about redlining. We learned about the subprime loans that kept the Black community from being able to own homes in the same way that the white community could. So I will give an example. So my little cousin recently went away to school, right? And she grew up in a neighborhood that was majority white. So she had white friends. Now, she didn't grow up in a well-off household, and neither did her friend. So needless to say, when she goes to college, or when she went to college, she had to take out loans. However, because her friend's family owned property, they owned a home, they were able to sell the home or mortgage the home in order to get her money to pay for school. Now, she wasn't able to pay for everything, but the little bit of money that she was able to get, she could pay for books, she could pay for food, she could pay for housing, whereas my little cousin didn't have that same opportunity. There was no home for her to mortgage, there was no land for her to mortgage, there was nothing for her to sell. So mainly, she's going to school with loans and grants. So. Okay. So let's get into some discussion. What did you learn that you didn't know before? And what trends did you see in the simulation?
The magnification of lost wealth that has occurred for generations, and the profound argument against, well, slavery ended a long time ago, gosh, it just, yeah. And how many things are still going on today. And in our group, we noted that that didn't include gentrification and non-illegal, quote unquote, segregation that still goes on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you brought up the slavery ended a long time ago, because I'll be talking about that a little bit in my sermon tomorrow. So bringing everything together. So anyone else, what did you learn and what trends did you see?
I think one of the things that I learned is just looking at the numbers, seeing the numbers side by side was a little bit, it took me back a little bit. I had learned about a lot of the different policies already, but I never got into the numbers. As far as the trends that I saw, I mean, it was pretty consistent with, you can see the disparities between the Black and the white, and how the white tend to continue to move forward, whereas it seemed like every single policy that we followed, there was one step back for the Blacks.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, actually, that's what I was going to say, Aaron, was I had a trend that I saw, but I was not going to speak because it was, unless somebody else had something. So Aaron, go right ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, one thing that I noticed, I think kind of going off of what the last person said, I'm so sorry, I forgot your name. Was that it was really hard. Like I was playing as a Black participant and it was really hard to like plan for the future. And I think that like a lot of the sort of like myth of like, the next generation will have it better and be more successful and stuff that I think is really common in like white families is like something that like we can take for granted because it's easier to like plan for like being able to pass on that like generational wealth and like knowing that like whatever policies are enacted they'll probably be like to your benefit. Whereas like when I was playing as the Black participant in this game, it was like one round I would get land and the next round I would like lose it immediately. And like it was really hard to like be like, because I had no idea what was going to happen next, to even think about like, planning in any sort of way. So that was something that I noticed.
Yeah, and that was great because, like you said, it's hard to build up a nest egg for your children or your grandchildren. It's hard to plan for how you're going to set the generations coming after you up for success when the things that you're building to set them up for success are just being taken one by one.
For me, it was housing contracts. That just like blows my mind. I never knew about that like growing up. Like that's just no, like rent to own is, something, I see those stores everywhere, but I never thought that they applied to like housing. And the fact that you could be paying for 29 years, a monthly payment, and then something happens and you miss one payment and you lose all of that equity that you had built up. That's just mind-boggling as to how that could be legal.
Yep. And I can't remember if it actually said it in the simulation, but there are places where it says in the deed that the home can never be sold to anyone of African descent.
Mm-hmm.
But however, thankfully, the Fair Housing Act nullifies that. But the fact that it's even in a deed, it's just it's so scary, right? It's so scary and it's so harmful. So let's go on to a couple more questions. So how do you?
Christian, I'm sorry. I just wanted to share that the trend that I saw in there was the trend of slimy excuses that whitewashed the racist perspective of the folks who are making the laws. I mean, because they couldn't come out and say, we're gonna exclude from Black individuals. We're gonna say it's a job or it's a agricultural worker, trying to cloak it and keep it just under the surface.
Yeah, and that's what we would call like dog whistle politics. So like you only know what's going on if you are a part of that group and you see it, right? So it's basically like, okay, well, I know that majority of the women in this community need childcare in order to work at said job. So what I'm going to do is instead of saying they can't work at this job, I'm just going to take away childcare. And this is really a roundabout way of discriminating. It's a roundabout way of discriminating. And the unfortunate thing is that in Washington, I see these things still happening. They're still happening. And that's why we exist at the Office of Public Witness, to speak out against it and to push back against it and to talk to our members of Congress into not supporting those type of bills and to support bills that are actually going to be equitable for everyone. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Okay, so let's go on to a couple more questions. So how do you see the racial wealth and income divide playing out in your community? And how does this impact your work to end hunger, poverty, or engage in other work in your community. So I think that through the presentation that we're going to see once we end this group discussion, that might play out a little bit, but if you all want to answer this question, go right ahead.
One thing I noted when we were in our breakout rooms is that just pre-COVID, I was doing research on Detroit and their beautification efforts of the city, and they were using a lot of the predatory practices against minority groups to achieve the work that they were doing, but they were trying to cloak it as something good and beneficial for the community. So it's still very active today. It's just people try to hide it under fancy words.
It's striking to me in the question about ending hunger and poverty. It's just so, after the simulation, it's just so much more clear that you can't even begin to address it without addressing racism or white supremacy. We want to segregate the two, and you can't do that.
Something that I've been hearing information from different sources about the narrative shift to change of the broken family unit, and the narrative, the false narrative, I should say. Just learning recently, the white plantation owners selling a slave so that their child could attend Harvard University. So they broke up the family unit, and seeing how that plays down through generations. And now it's with the for-profit prison of breaking up the family unit and the false narrative. And so for me, just that's plenty of lost opportunity to start working together to have an impact, to be able to build that nest egg, to be able to work as a family, and taking us white folks to shift the narrative.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And, you mentioned family separation, and we see a lot of family separation going on with the immigrants at the border. But family separation has been a tool of oppression that has been used in America for a very long time. Okay, so let's get to a couple more questions. Okay. So what did you learn about the importance of racial equity, and how can you incorporate a racial equity lens into your daily work life, worship, policies, practices, and advocacy?
I bet Willie has something to say.
Yes, I say our presentation coming up has a lot of revealing information of how we can engage.
I really like the graphic that you shared, Christian, of the people trying to see the baseball game. I thought that was such a, I was fumbling over my words on how to explain it, but then that put it in such a clear picture that it just made it make much more sense to me as I was seeing equality versus equity of how, folks are still on different levels, even with equality. But it's only equity that gets them, being able to see over the fence. And I really like the image of them, tearing down the fence posts too. That's kind of cool. Trying to get to the game.
Yeah, it's a fun image, but it's also a very telling image, right? Because with them tearing down the fence post, they're tearing down the barrier that's causing the inequity in the first place. Let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it so that we can all see this game and not have to jump over 55, 65, 75 different hoops that other people don't have to jump over. Okay, so I will wrap it up. thank you all so much for doing the simulation. As I told the other folks who finished the simulation a little earlier, I am still in contact with Marlisa Gamblin, who used to work at Bread for the World. She is the one who created the racial wealth gap learning simulation. She's a great friend of mine, and I let her know that I was going to be doing the simulation. So I will give her the feedback from the simulation and let her know that it went great, and it was very well received and very informative. But if you all want to access the simulation, you want to access some of the policies from the simulation or anything else, you can go to bread.org/simulation, and all of that information is there for you.
Everyone's clapping for you, Christian. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was a great job, and really teed us up well for your sermon tomorrow. I'm sure. I'm excited to hear that. And then also it's teeing us up good for Willie and Dustin too, as they present, like as they bring this home to us, literally, like what does it mean as we step out onto our streets, into our neighborhood? How can this impact our work? So Willie and Dustin, it is all you. Would you like me to share my screen with your presentation on it?
If it's okay, I can share mine.
Definitely, I got it. I got it teed up here, so I'll do that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. All right. Can everyone see that? Okay. Cool. All right.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
So today, if you want to go to the next slide, Ben, Willie and I will speak about the local history of racial prejudices. Christian did an amazing job giving us a national scope, and we're going to talk about how some of those policies affected the greater Lansing area and the Black folks who lived here. We'll go into what are reparations, give a bit of an historical perspective, and how they've been used in the past. And then Willie will take us home into how we propose to repair the breach here in the local greater Lansing area. So the next slide, please, Ben. We're going to start with an overview of our local history as related to racial prejudices. By no means will this be a complete history, but it should give you an understanding of how racial prejudices and policies negatively affected Black citizens in our community. We will focus on Lansing and East Lansing, but we must acknowledge that each community has its own unique past, and we encourage you to explore that. Racial prejudice was never just a Southern problem. Slavery might have been more prominent there, but it's existed here in the North for just as long. This sign popped up during World War II here in Detroit, Michigan, to our south. Here in local area, one of the earlier examples of racial violence was when Earl Little bought a home in a whites-only Lansing subdivision of Westmont. He was encouraged to leave the whites-only community, but he refused. The home was eventually burned to the ground, and even despite losing his home, he was later beaten and placed on Lansing streetcar tracks to be run over. Earl left 7 small children, including 6-year-old Malcolm X, who had grown up in Lansing with his family. Next slide. Redlining was a federal policy, as Christian explained to us. In Lansing, it occurred at a more of a micro level, with blocks and streets being redlined instead of entire sections of the city, as we might have seen in Detroit or Chicago. The red areas here are the places where Blacks were restricted to purchasing homes, often done on the contract buying that Christian had explained in the simulation. Meanwhile, in East Lansing, the next slide, there were policies restricting any Black homeowners at all. The restrictive covenants we spoke about earlier. Denying sale of homes to any non-whites, and in other cases, any non-Christians. Because of these, buyers did not have access to the mortgage market. The only choice was the purchase of homes on land contracts, as we already discussed. During the 30-year repayment process, they would earn no equity and no rights to their homes. Despite being struck down in 1948 by Shelley versus Kramer in the Supreme Court, it was still a common practice well into the late 1960s. And these covenants are still in deeds here in East Lansing. The next slide, we'll see the two first black men to own homes in East Lansing. Both of them were faculty members at Michigan State University. David Dixon on the right became the first black homeowner in 1953. He was able to purchase the home because Michigan State College President John Hanna purchased it for him and then discreetly sold it to him. President Hanna offered the same to Robert Greene on the right, only to be rebuffed with Greene saying, "I appreciate the offer, but are you going to buy every black man who comes to MSU a home?" And that was really the turning point. The Human Rights Commission here in East Lansing was eventually founded, and Greene was able to purchase a home on his own accord in 1968. And we just recently named a middle school after him. Black families who weren't, in the next slide, weren't led by an MSU faculty member had little choice to purchase homes. When Clarence Underwood arrived in East Lansing in 1955, he was repeatedly told, "We do not rent to Negroes," when he called to find a home for his family. If you were to show up to a housing or to a viewing to look at a home and already had a phone conversation and not acknowledged his race, he would immediately be told, we're not selling to you, we've already sold it, things like that to avoid it. He thought about getting back on the train and going home, but he started walking the streets of Lansing and finally found a man on Butler Street with a room to rent for his family. Next slide. In 1963, the East Lansing Human Relations Committee was formed to study open housing practices, but despite their best efforts, black citizens, like I said, were not able to purchase homes until Congress passed the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Meanwhile, back in Lansing, on the next slide, between 63 and 67, policies of urban renewal were further restricting where black citizens could live and destroying their homes as well. The I-496 project bisected an active, vibrant black community in the Southwest Capital area, virtually destroying it and causing families to relocate. Next slide, Ben. An appraiser would show up at your door one day, telling you how much your home was worth, how much you could get for it, and strongly advising the homeowner not to fight City Hall because there was no way they could win because of the eminent domain policy, which we had discussed earlier. No relocation assistance was offered at the time. Renters and those who were buying their homes on contract received absolutely nothing. They were just told to leave their homes. 890 homes were taken. Businesses, churches, schools were completely wiped out. The souls of these communities were taken from them, and with little to no consideration. Adolph Burton, on the next slide, was a member of this vibrant black community. He would say later, in that neighborhood was our local dentist, our doctor, who we purchased our groceries from, my grandmother's house 3 blocks away, as well as the church we all went to. On the next slide, you'll see a picture of, the Lincoln School in Lansing, which was another victim of the 496 construction. It was a predominantly black school, and these children, their learning institution was taken from them, and they were separated into different schools in the community. 74% of redline districts are still heavily segregated, and at a severe economic disadvantage today, according to the National Community Reinvestment Population. And on this slide, I just wanted to point out the fact that through these fights for equitable housing, it's important to note that the Lansing and East Lansing churches were on the front lines, using the power of the pulpit and the voices of their congregation to push officials to adopt open housing policies. Despite these practices, these churches that are predominantly white have benefited from redlining and other racist policies, and we must acknowledge that. Our churches and their members have not had the same obstacles to buying homes, educating their children, dealing with financial institutions, or seeking medical treatment as our Black and Black brothers and sisters have done. It is for this reason that we propose the Repairing the Breach project. And I will turn it over to Willie, who will speak more on reparations itself.
Okay, thanks, Dustin. So we come to bring it home with action. And what can we do? We come to the third part of our trilogy for the weekend, reparations. What are reparations? Reparations are known to most of us, and they talk about righting historical wrongs. And so in the next slide, we see that there have been examples of global examples that talk about reparations. West Germany paid $7 billion to Israel to atone for the Holocaust. And so that's an example of how reparations work. Folk were killed in the, Jews were killed in the Holocaust, and this was an atonement paid to Israel and to the World Jewish Congress. In 1994, South Africa established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which proposed to pay $3,500 to each victim of apartheid. So do we have examples in the US of reparations being paid? In the next slide, we can see that the US, in fact, has done reparations. So in 71, a grant of $1 billion was, and 44 million acres of land were ceded to Alaskan natives. In 86, we have an example right here in Michigan. Michigan paid $32 million to the Ottawa tribe for land that had been ceded to Michigan when Michigan was becoming a state. And the federal government reneged on the promises made to the Ottawa tribe. And so in 86, there was payment. And in 1988, we had payment, reparations paid to Japanese Americans for internment that happened during World War II. Each citizen, Japanese American, was paid $20,000. And that was a formal apology. I think that's important because Black people have not been made available of an apology even. So of all the wrongs that we just saw in that simulation. And so what can we do? Well, there are some recent examples, and these are pretty good examples. And there are a lot of examples, and many of you probably have seen the recent overtures toward trying to repair some of the wrongs of the past. In 1994, Florida awarded $150,000 to each living former resident of Rosewood. Rosewood was a community that was burned and destroyed in 1923. That's been memorialized in a movie. I don't know, some of you may have seen that. In fact, the movie was called Rosewood. Now, in 1999, Black farmers were awarded restitution for discrimination by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, right? That happened in the 80s and 90s. Now, let me tell you about this one, is that Black farmers are not receiving this money. And you might be able to guess why. White farmers are crying foul white farmers are saying, well, we didn't get any money. How dare you compensate Black farmers? So white farmers are holding up the money, the funds that could go to Black farmers in litigation. They have adamantly decided that they're going to fight Black farmers being awarded funds in restitution for discrimination. So even that's not going forward as it should. And Black farmers are still losing land, losing money. The same story. And in 2005, there was compensation for Black citizens in Prince Edward County, Virginia. At integration with Brown v. Board of Education, this county in Virginia chose to shut their schools down rather than integrate them. All right, the next slide. So the heart of this is, our descendants of enslaved Africans in this community and in any community owed reparations. And the impediments that we see right here, and that we just, you would have thought we synchronized these talks, right? That have just, that we've just talked about. Slavery, the Homestead Acts, which gave land to white citizens, and there were two Homestead Acts, one after the war, and Black people would have been able to avail themselves of that, but it didn't happen. I mean, very, very few Black people were able to get land, but tons, millions of white people were. So that, again, where's the wealth going? The GI Bill we just talked about in our groups. Where is the wealth going, and why Black people were not able to avail themselves of the GI Bill loans? Sharecropping. I have a kind of a canned speech I talk about. My father was a sharecropper. So I know about sharecropping, and sharecropping is another method. And we saw that in our simulation, that took wealth away from Black people. Jim Crow laws, same story, took wealth. And remember that Jim Crow laws lasted 100 years. Now, this is not just something that, happened 10 years or so, 100 years, so that Black people were not able to avail themselves of the wealth after Reconstruction. Voting rights have been infringed. Redlining, we talked about, we know that story now. And mass incarceration. All of these are impediments to wealth. So just keep that in the brain. And the next slide then talks about what Christian's presentation was about, the racial wealth divide. So the racial wealth divide is a structural problem, as we just discussed, and that requires a structural solution. Something that we want to think about this weekend as a kickoff to a structural solution. Wealth is simply the sum total of what a family owns minus what they owe. Christian gave a great example about her cousin. A family's wealth accumulation is the amount of wealth that one inherits from their family. So if you haven't inherited in the wealth, or if your family has no wealth, then you can't inherit it, and you see the wealth accumulate with white people and not accumulate with Black people, hence giving us this racial wealth divide. Next slide shows us what that looks like. Again, this is another outline of what it looks like. This shows the median wealth by race, even over a 30-year period, right? So that if we just looked at 2016, the wealth, if you look at all of the country, median wealth is about $81,000 per household, right? Then when you look, if you divide this out by race, white Americans increased to about $147,000. What happens in the black residents? In 2016, African Americans had lost from 30 years ago. 30 years ago, the median income was $7,000. And that has decreased just about $3,500. You think about living on an income like that for a household. Black and brown people have lost. Latinx community has even increased a bit above the African American community. Next slide shows, African Americans is the only ethnic group that started in the country with zero wealth. So if we look at this graphic, then we see that today the red bars represent 2016. 15% of white Americans have zero wealth. But the next two columns look at 37% of Black Americans have zero wealth. Kind of what Christian was describing about her niece, and the kind of thing we can point to with many, many Black families. How do you go to school? How do you buy a house if you have zero wealth? And the same thing is true with in the Latinx community, and that's even a little bit better than African Americans. So then we go to, how do we start to fix that? What can we do? How can we repair the breach? So we have, next slide shows what would be a good solution. The best solution would be if the government would take care of it, right? We all pay taxes. If the government took care of reparations, the example we gave of the Japanese Americans, that wouldn't be nearly enough, but it would be a proposal. HR 40 was introduced by John Conyers. This would be a possible solution. John Conyers introduced this in 1989, and he reintroduced this House bill every year until he died. He did that every year for 30 years, and he just died in 2019. Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee took this bill up, and she introduced it in the 116th Congress, which was the 1920 and 2020 Congress, and this year, which was the 117th Congress. And over those 30 years, right, this year, the bill finally got out of committee. It only left the committee and got to the floor of the House this year in April. And it's still there. It's on the floor. It hadn't been voted on. And the bill is asking, really, the bill is asking for a commission. It's not asking for specific reparations. It's not saying we want X amount of money. It's asking for a commission to study reparations and the role of government in that. Next slide. So here in the Greater Lansing community, Greater Lansing area, we're embarking on and thinking about faith-based reparations. We have examples this Memorial Episcopal Church in Baltimore, the participants found that the church was founded by a slave owner. And so earlier this year, they created a $500,000 fund for reparations to the Black community. They proposed to do this $100,000 a year over 5 years. And so we are here in this community, and next slide also talks about historically how faith-based reparations, this is not new. You know, we didn't suddenly come up with that, or other churches suddenly come up with that. It's been around a long time. This is a great example here. In 1969, James Foreman proposed a Black manifesto that would ask churches to give $500 million in reparations for the mistreatment of African Americans from white churches and synagogues. Foreman said, you know, these churches have a lot of money, and probably because of because of slavery. So he's asking that the churches share that. And so this was like 50 years ago, and now we're having renewed interest in this. And so that's what we here in this community are venturing out into. Next slide. So how do you repair the breach, and what is that based on? This is repairing the breach is based on Isaiah 58:12. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundation of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. And the next slide talks about an organization or group that's been formed. We are meeting, we have established ourselves, and we are decided on the name of the Justice League of Greater Lansing, Michigan. We exist to repair the breach caused by the historical damage of slavery and its aftermath. In the spirit of repentance for the sin of racism, we seek to build relationships and facilitate reparations between houses of worship and collaborative partners to increase wealth equity for African Americans in the Greater Lansing area. And we envision, in this next slide, you'll see, the Justice League of Greater Lansing has submitted our commitment to healing and becoming the beloved community by making the connection between faith and racial justice in the form of reparations. In the Greater Lansing area, reparations will mainly be committed from predominantly white houses of worship as part of their efforts to repair the breach caused by centuries of slavery, inequality of wealth accumulation, and the failure to live into God's plan of equality for all of humanity. Let's get the next slide, Ben. So how do we do that? We're proposing to, as George, as Foreman suggested, we are committed to collecting monies from churches, church endowments, fundraisers, community fundraisers, and then building an endowment fund that would do reparations in the Black community. And our next slide talks about management. We're suggesting that we create an advisory board of African-American pastors, leaders from the Black community to oversee and manage this and have suggestions, of course, about what the reparations how the reparations would be used in the community. And finally, what would we do with the funds? Ta-da! Housing loans and or grants for first-time buyers or for any home buyer, not just first-time. Scholarships for African Americans attending college. That example that Christian used is what many African American students face. And grants for business startups. I always hear Black people say, I have a business or I would like to start a business, but I cannot get a loan. So that's the outline of the project that we're proposing. So I welcome any comments or any suggestions. Or
if you click on, or if you use your smartphone to click on that QR code, you'll be taken to a proposal paper that we've written about the project as well. So if you're interested in more, that's one way you can learn more.
are there any comments or suggestions or ideas? We would love to hear those from you. This weekend, we're kind of calling, we are calling this our kickoff for this project. This weekend on World Communion Weekend, this educational piece that Christian has wonderfully enabled for us. And tomorrow she'll still be a part of the program, and we will worship together at First Press, the two communities. So it's onward and upward from here.
Willie, I really appreciate the way that you pulled it all together and have included our local history as well. Nice job.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to really thank you for this presentation. It was very informative, especially the local history. I have family who live in Detroit. I have a lot of family in Detroit, and a lot of family in Lansing because a lot of people went to Michigan State. So Michigan is a place that's close to my heart. So I really appreciate this. And I just want to let everybody know that I put in the chat the Office of Public Witness sent out an action alert on HR 40. We've been doing so much work on HR 40 trying to get this bill passed in the House and in the Senate. So I put an action alert in, call your member of Congress, text your member of Congress, email your member of Congress and tell them that we need this bill. Like Willie said, it is not even giving reparations. It is a commission to study the injustices that have happened and propose reparations. And then I also put in a fact sheet that gives more information about HR 40 and religious justifications from the Christian perspective and the Jewish perspective on reparations.
I just want to note that I put the Zoom link in chat for tomorrow's joint worship. It is in person at First Presbyterian downtown in Lansing, but if you'd like to attend virtually, the information is in the chat. Everyone's welcome. You don't have to be a member of Holt or Lansing. Everyone's invited.
Mary, you were about to say something?
I don't know if it's even necessary, but I'm going to say it anyway. When we were developing the proposals, it was important to note that, yes, there are a lot of other populations that, need assistance, help, reparations, but our focus is on African Americans. Our focus is on Black Americans. And we are committed to sticking with that and saying this is important to us. So if other people saying, well, what about American Indians? What about our focus is African Americans.
Yes, thanks, Mary. Many people in the room here are actively working with the Justice League. And Kirk, those cakes will be ready. Is Kirk still here? Those cakes will be ready next week. No, I'm kidding with Kirk because we love that Justice League name, and we kid about having cakes.
And
But,
Heather and Anita, I'm sorry, but Wonder Woman is taken.
Yeah, there you go. But many people in this room are working with the Justice League. And so for more information or interested in getting involved with the group, please leave your email in the chat, and we'd be happy to contact you and talk about and pass on information about meeting times and our plans for moving ahead with the project.
Willie, I also want to plug your presentation tomorrow after worship too. If you'd like to, another opportunity to kind of dive deep into this. Willie and Dustin, will you be there tomorrow as well, or no? No, okay, just so it's Willie. But also, I mean, something that's really inspiring about this for me, Willie, is that, you know, we started talking about this months ago, and it was a spark from you because so many people were coming to you saying, what can we do? And you're like, well, this is something that we can do, right? It's very tangible. And this is an opportunity to kind of, as much as learning and studying and dwelling with it is important, but this is an opportunity to actually step out in faith and to do something actionable, which it can be really overwhelming to do something actionable too. It's like, there's so much wrong. What can we do? This is kind of a tool in a community where we can step out and do something. So I'm grateful for that, and for all the work that you've put in and that our group has put in as well. I'm excited to see this discernment take place and see where it goes. Kirk, do you mind? It looks like folks are having to go, and we are over our time, so I don't want to keep folks too much. So Kirk, do you mind praying us out? And then if folks want to stay and talk, you're more than welcome to. But for all those who do have to go, I'd like to close us off with some prayer.
All right, let us pray. Barrier breaking, bridge building God, thank you for our discussion today. As difficult as it has been at times, the facts that we've heard that have been left unaddressed in our culture for far, far too long leave us unsettled. But also, God, we pray that we would sense the presence of your Spirit moving in us, feeling those truths take hold and continue to be with us, that we might be inspired by your Spirit to be your transforming agents right here in our community. We thank you for Christian, for Dustin, for Willie, for the words and the information they have brought to us today. We pray that you would help us to bring our efforts together, bind us by your Spirit, that even our simulations might be a bridge to the manifestation of your reality and your dreams for your people here in our community and across our country and throughout the world. For this we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody.
Thanks everyone for coming.
See you tomorrow morning.
Christian.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. All right.
Good job, Ben. Nice job, Willie.
Yeah, thank
Yes,
you, Willie.
thank you. Yeah,
Great
great job. I
presentation.
thought this went really well.
Yeah.
That was a great presentation that she does.
You got to tie those two together, Willie. I mean, that's a great 1-2. It really nice hand in hand. That worked out really well.
I know. Yeah, you would have thought we got together before.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. I will see y'all tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.
See you, Kirk.
I'm gonna head out as well.
Bye,
but
Kathleen. Bye, Stuart.
Bye.
See y'all.
I'm gonna head out too. See you tomorrow.
See you, Kathleen. See you, Stuart. Thanks for being here today.